This is a bottom-up financial revolution. This is a belief in breaking the cycle. Revival and chaos are merely the beginning of a new order, while collapse is nothing more than the curtain call for the old paradigm. Code is law. The encrypted world returns sovereignty to individuals and lets computing power reshape trust. Welcome to Secret Talk. What is compliance? Compliance with whose rules? Who sets these rules?
Many people in the crypto space think compliance is unnecessary. But I believe that compliance in crypto allows us to connect with the traditional world. Integrating with finance and with different sectors globally is extremely important. Good evening.
I hope that the compliance I pursue is the one in my heart. It is the great path within me. You are now watching the first season of Secret Talk, Hong Kong Special Edition. We want to thank our sponsor for their support of this must-watch show. It has the highest budget and best guest lineup of any crypto talk show. We hope this relaxed conversation helps you get to know a colorful and diverse Web3 world. We want to thank Gate for their full sponsorship of the first season of Secret Talk. There is a QR code on our screen with a link to download the Gate exchange. Today, the topic we're going to discuss is one that touches the soul. It's about regulation and freedom. So today we've invited someone of great importance. The first guest is Vito from Meteora. What is your relationship with Caroline Carr?
Now, all I need to do is latch onto Sister Carr's coattails. Sister Carr is our CEO.
We met in New York.
See
you in New York. The face is yes. And there's also the image of our gate. The spokesperson is Kevin, and we at Sandbox are responsible for the Greater China region. Eric, head of growth.
Hello.
Today we're going to talk about this topic. Regulation and freedom. Without regulation, there's chaos and death. Without freedom, there's also chaos and death. First, everyone state your position. Which side are you on?
I think it really depends on the specific situation.
In what kind of situation do you think it's necessary?
Simply put, because Sandbox is ultimately a platform, we also have an extensive portfolio of IPs and a diverse range of strategic partners. These partners consist of entities such as banks, operating organizations, and also a wide variety of traditional Web 2.0 IPs.
So when it comes to B2B,
I think to some extent a certain level of regulation is necessary.
When do you feel that regulation is more of a hindrance?
When I'm involved in things like transactions, innovation, or when they're trying to issue some new assets, that's when regulation might become a bit
unable to keep up.
If we look at it purely from the perspective of freedom itself, actually, it's not that regulation and freedom it's not entirely in conflict, because when we originally defined freedom in the past, it always had certain boundaries. Everyone has choices to make. The right to live freely, freedom of speech, or the freedom to express ideas and so on should not be subject to certain, let's say, unreasonable restrictions. But actually, there is a boundary to this. I remember there's a very classic saying. It goes, we can't just do whatever we want, anything at all. But we can choose the right not to do something. In fact, that's what freedom really is. If I don't want to do something, I can choose not to do it. And you can't force me to do it.
Nowadays, freedom isn't about doing whatever you want, but about being able to not do what you don't want to do. That's what real freedom is.
If we narrow the scope a bit, say, between freedom and regulation, actually, I think what we often refer to as the part where there's a conflict between the two. At different stages, it actually takes on different forms. What's different is that when an industry is in its early stages and something new emerges, a lot of the time it comes with a sense of breaking away. It appears in a form that breaks the original rules, what Schumpeter called disruptive innovation, right? It means that the existing rules might be disrupted, and this disruption, from the perspective of the current established order, it might seem to be in conflict with regulations. But if you look at it from a long-term perspective, perhaps some parts are indeed in conflict and may need to be aligned, while other parts, on the contrary, regulators need to realize that new technologies and new ideas have emerged. There are now new, more dynamic forms taking shape. This might actually force regulation to change. So freedom itself isn't about breaking away from all constraints entirely. Absolute freedom leads to absolute lack of freedom. If you have the freedom to rob, it means others end up with no money, right? So I think the relationship between freedom and regulation is always dynamic. It's like a Taiji diagram where yin and yang generate each other and occasionally merge together. At certain points, when you have conflicts, the perspectives can be very different. When you're the one harmed by someone else's freedom, you can't wait for regulation to step in. You're hoping regulation comes to save you.
In the end, it's your interests that determine your stance.
Your position shapes your thinking. For instance, needing development, we find that nothing seems to work. This doesn't work, that doesn't work, even though I can see the future, but you're not allowing it. At this point, the topic of freedom or the calls for regulatory change become much stronger. At this point, the main topic might be different.
If there were no compliance or regulation, I wouldn't have entered the crypto space. I only got into this field because of that. When I first started, I entered the crypto space about 4 years ago. I was with the first company in Hong Kong to get a license and work at a regulated exchange. Then when I came to Gate, at the beginning, it was for their compliance work. I was working on obtaining licenses, that's how it was. I think it's a very simple principle. If you want Bitcoin to reach 150,000 or 200,000, it can't just be a niche thing. It definitely needs to go mainstream and be in line with others. Traditional finance is all about integration. If you want to integrate things, the main thing is you must have KYC and AML measures in place because you can't have this gap. Sometimes it's actually quite interesting. Many people insist, I don't want this, I want freedom, I don't want regulation, I don't want compliance, I need decentralization. That's what they say. But when nothing's wrong, it's fine. When something happens, they say, I want to call the police. I want to find the site admin.
Find Gator customer service to help me unlock it, that account.
In fact, you still need a site admin, or if you want, Bitcoin needs to reach new highs again. Did BlackRock come to buy? When they came, they still have concerns, they still want compliance. Without compliance, when things aren't compliant, I also think BlackRock won't come. But I think the crypto market is actually really, really big now. 5 or 10 years ago, this field was much smaller. Back then, there were a lot of things that didn't need to be compliant. That was one aspect. Decentralized things are needed on one hand. For example, fiat currency is the same. You take 100 yuan to pay for something to buy lunch. The staff tells you, I need your ID, I need to do KYC for you. I'd say, are you crazy? I just came here to buy breakfast and you want to do KYC. But if you go to the bank to open an account, then it's definitely required. So it's the same money. There are scenarios where KYC is needed, but custody isn't required. And there are also places where custody and compliance are necessary.
Understood. Because Kevin comes from a traditional finance background, he understands that regulation is beneficial for the orderly development of finance. But why are we talking about this topic today? Everyone has seen The Shawshank Redemption, right? There's a scene in it. I remember it very clearly. There's an old prison warden. He'd been in prison for 20 or 30 years and had gotten used to it. In prison, you had to report even to go to the bathroom, and everything you did had to be reported. Life was lived according to strict rules and order. After he was released, he worked as a cashier in a supermarket. But he couldn't handle the freedom outside. The world. The pace of this kind of life was too much for him, and in the end, he chose to hang himself, to end his own life. This story left an extremely deep impression on me. So bringing this back to the crypto world, as you just mentioned, in the financial world, we need AML, anti-money laundering, and we must have KYC. We need to know who is using the money, whether the money is dirty or clean. I think this is an issue worth discussing.
But I think it's very different because in the crypto space, any action you take is actually on-chain. So in fact, your transparency and everything else are very clear. So whether there is regulation or not, how do they go about regulating this? I think conversely, it might actually help people from the traditional economic system. They can better understand what's really happening in this space. But whether it can be completely transplanted over like this, I don't think that's possible because after all, we have the strength of this circle is that everything moves very quickly. The pace, everything. It can make a lot of decisions and get a lot of things done very fast. So when it comes to regulation, to some extent it might, if you just transplant it over like this, it will definitely have some impact. So it needs to be adjusted and you have to adapt to some new service offerings or update your ideas to ensure that this so-called protection of our assets is also covered. I think this is really about how to find a balanced approach.
So in the end, what exactly are we complying with? Whose rules are we following and who gets to define whether your money is clean or dirty?
I've talked about this on many occasions before. In fact, to put it bluntly, the world's major financial centers are actually money laundering centers, but that's not the legal definition. Deep down, we all know what money laundering really is. What are we doing? We know that within the global GDP, or in so-called low-tax economies or tax evasion economies, in other words, borrowing money, if you go by the compliance rules of certain places, this money should be taxed. So compliance is a regional matter. It involves sovereignty or enforcement. Whether it's the political system or not, it all comes down to subjective interests and definitions. That's why, in many places, regulatory fragmentation and regulatory arbitrage exist. So why are the world's financial centers concentrated in just a few places? It's because these places tend to have relatively more accommodating regulations in these areas. They are more relaxed and provide a lot of conveniences. People usually think that the so-called gray economy is about things like arms trading or money laundering for terrorist organizations, but that's actually not the case. 70 to 80% of it. In fact, it's mainly about tax avoidance, how to legally reduce or avoid taxes on legitimate income. In the long run, this kind of non-compliance or irregularity will continue to exist. This isn't a Web3 issue. Even in Web2, it's been a long-standing phenomenon within financial institutions. Because different regions have different regulatory environments, people can take advantage of these rules. This is something that has existed for a long time. It's an objective reality.
So Kevin, what's your take on this? What do you think? When it comes to compliance, what kind of regulations do you have in mind?
We've all been through this before. When the internet first started, it was actually the same situation. Back then, the prevailing idea was that this was an online world that didn't belong to any particular country. You could say or write anything you wanted online. We've experienced that era of the internet. It was pretty wild, but now that's all gone, and people actually realize that compliance is still necessary. However, the internet is still something essential for us nowadays. Like, you might say, what if it doesn't work in Hong Kong? I'll just take where I put my private server, where I host it. You can't control that. There's still that kind of thing, but overall, there's still a main direction. You could say that now, for every website we visit, we see this cookie notice. You have to accept their cookies. It's everywhere now, but there are still some non-compliant areas, but they're no longer the main trend. But there's an interesting point you just mentioned. Whose responsibility is it? The good thing about compliance now is that we've already gone through both the internet and traditional finance. So we know which areas are more serious. That is the illegal stuff. Or, as you just said, if you haven't started regulating me yet, how am I supposed to be compliant? But we also have our own ways to deal with our users. To face our community. Yes, for example, Sprite Gold now has a Zhaoye office in almost every main building. But there are no regulations saying you need to pull from reserve. This is a compliance self-certification that we impose on ourselves.
No one requires it, but we need to prove it ourselves.
Some local offices have also contacted us with questions, but we are not there. We have no presence there, no one is there, and there are no operations. But we also respond that we hold ourselves to higher standards. A bit higher.
To be more specific, you see, Kevin is focused on the exchange track. Let's talk about exchange compliance. For example, if your user takes this money and transfers it to a place that this country defines as an illegal organization, or transfers it to somewhere you think the money isn't clean, as an exchange, this risk is always there. Even if you obtain compliance licenses from all over the world, you will still have to face the issue of being sanctioned by a certain country.
What you just said was very good, no matter what kind of license an exchange gets. There are still compliance risks, right? So even when I step forward today, is there still risk? As long as I haven't been taken in for questioning one day, you can just look at me and you'll know. Actually, we haven't encountered this problem yet. Our risk control and compliance measures are solid, so a lot of users come to us. We often get asked why there is risk control, why can't I use my account, why can't I use the next one? Actually, sometimes even the users themselves don't know whether the money they just received is really theirs, or if it all actually belongs to someone else behind the scenes. Sometimes it might already be tainted money. They themselves don't know, they think they're innocent. But just like Eric said, everything is right there on the surface for us to see. We can see it clearly. Before you even came to us, this transaction was already linked to a hacker. Isn't this wallet unacceptable?
So everyone, if you're not sure whether your money is clean, please do not transfer it to a centralized exchange. Handle it on-chain.
On the other hand, it's good for us here, because if we have this kind of money, we have it all accounted for. If we act with integrity and resign from our posts, for example. All the money we earn and send out is clean. When it goes out, you can be sure there are no issues with it. So that's basically it.
I think Kevin brought up a really interesting point. Just like Merkel said, you need to be aware of this issue. The Federal Reserve wasn't established by the US government, right?
It's not an organization.
It's a corporation. In fact, back then, even American banks weren't regulated at all. You have to know that in the early days, every bank in the US could issue its own dollars. As long as you had enough gold, you could issue dollars, and the value of each dollar was different. You know, like Morgan or Datong, those reputable banks, their dollars would be worth a bit more, while other dollars might be cheaper. Some were even worth only half as much as others. Later, amid industry chaos, self-governance emerged, eventually leading to the Federal Reserve. Regulation often drives this, but it isn't always top-down. It can also be industry-led, for example. Some competitors like Gate work together to promote these standards, and that's how it might come into being. So this kind of regulation might actually come from internal collapses within the industry itself. That's how industry standards are formed. So I think this is really interesting. It matches what we said about the early days. Some characteristics of financial markets in their early stages. It seems like the same thing is happening in the crypto financial markets. It's as if history is repeating itself, but perhaps with different technologies, different frameworks, and different philosophies.
So when it comes to regulation, I think that if we have the right to speak, then we can define the rules. Then I can define whether you two are compliant, whether you can issue a certain token, whether you can operate this product or platform within my compliance framework. So I am determined to be the one who sets the rules. This is very important. In our circle, innovation is fast enough for regulation. From the perspective of our technological development, regulation often can't keep up and is lagging behind. Only afterwards does it realize, I should find a tool to manage this. But the problem is, you just can't find a tool to manage it well. Why do I say it actually increases the burden on sellers? For example, exchanges, in terms of compliance, you can obtain licenses from every country in the world, set up all the KYC procedures and get everything in order. But the thing you're trading, this Bitcoin, this asset, it's inherently designed to resist regulation. Right now it's still small, its market cap is less than 2, but if it stabilizes, after the crypto bill passes, it will keep growing bigger and bigger, eventually surpassing gold. When it becomes the #1 asset in the world, it will naturally be non-compliant by its very nature. Even powerful institutions like the Federal Reserve or CRS have never said that Bitcoin belongs to finance, or that it is a security or a bond. No one has ever said anything about it. When you can't find a tool to restrain it, will there be decentralization that surpasses regulatory capabilities? Will everyone see that scenario at that time?
I don't think you can look at it that way. Take gold, for example. If you dig up a piece of gold now, the gold itself on the ground isn't regulated either. Or let's say you have gold at home. If I transfer it to you or you transfer it to me, it's just like Bitcoin, digital gold. It can be transferred quickly around the world. But countries do have border controls. If you carry a certain amount of gold without declaring it, that's illegal, right? But Bitcoin might actually make a breakthrough in this area. Because technology keeps advancing, it will break through some of the old technical methods and barriers and might even force you to adopt new approaches. In the past, we talked about blockchain, right? It's anonymous, you can't trace it. In fact, nowadays, it's often possible to track you down because they can trace you on chain. Security companies can use your physical IP address. It's just an adaptive process. I don't think regulation is completely powerless against it. It's just that it has taken another step forward. It's making progress, as we say. The balance between freedom and regulation has moved a step further. It's become even more liberating. But I think whether it's freedom or something absolute, this balance too is a process of pursuit. There's no such thing as absolute. It's like when we make dough. If there's too much flour, add water. If there's too much water, add flour. It's just that kind of process. If you endlessly pursue freedom, you'll find that a lot of problems arise. Regulation will then catch up and try to keep pace. But when regulation catches up, if it's too strict, you'll find it stifles innovation. This also happens with political forces, as we mentioned. For example, voters will support it, right? That more open and innovative policy. Trump was elevated as the crypto president in this way. If it weren't for the support of tens of millions of American crypto voters, the outcome would be far from certain. But now, because he has taken such a clear and bold stance, voter support for crypto has very likely already taken shape politically. With this kind of power, as we used to say about American politics, and as you just mentioned regarding that issue, who are the rule makers? In fact, it's the government that sets the rules. Of course, there's no doubt that the industry has its own standards. But where does the government's power come from? It actually comes from the voters, the electorate. If there are a large number of crypto voters in the US, originally the Republican and Democratic voter bases were very solid. Although swing voters are important and can influence the outcome, the number of swing voters used to be quite small. You have to win over a significant portion of these swing voters. But Trump keenly picked up on this. He recognized the trend of crypto and the presence of crypto voters. He saw the numbers and the political power, and he made a clear and strong show of support. As a result, he managed to pull over some of the previously deep blue voters. So when we see this overwhelming victory and this rule, if we take a step forward, that's the government. But if we look one step further back, where does the government's power come from? It might be granted by the people. But why do I say might? Because I think money plays a huge role in this. So while the people do express some of their interest, a lot of it, now that the crypto industry has money, it's also engaging in political lobbying, just like Israel does. Lobbying in the United States, these groups have a huge influence on all aspects of American foreign policy and politics. I think crypto voters and crypto money and politics also have a direct impact on a country like the United States.
All along, I've always felt that when Trump shouted out last year in Nashville, that line, "If you own Bitcoin, vote for me." The next day, he received 120 million in political donations. That's twice as much as what he used to get from his traditional old donors. So a lot of people ask me, in this world, when will change happen first? I think as long as a country's votes can decide the direction of that country's policies, that place will definitely undergo this new financial revolution. Trump not only got the money, but also, at that time, 24% of Americans held cryptocurrency, and he gained 24% of the votes through their support. Then he said, after I take office, after I become president, the first thing I'll do is fire Gary Gensler. The second thing, I will make Bitcoin part of the national strategic reserves. The third thing, I won't sell a single Bitcoin I hold. That number of votes will just keep surging upward. As long as you hold digital assets, I think everyone will feel they have to vote for him. So up to now, you can see, why do we say rules need to be set? When it comes to making money, Trump doesn't hide it at all. He's a businessman through and through. So look at the first thing, issuing a meme coin for himself. The family stablecoin USD1 has also been issued. If USD1 is to become a money-making tool for the family, it needs two things. The first is use cases on exchanges. There have to be some. I don't know if Gate has $1 trading yet. Probably does, right? It'll be available soon. You'll see. All the exchanges will follow suit. Once there are use cases, the second thing needed is legal regulations. Rules need to be established. The Genesis Act, the Clarity Act, and the Anti-CBDC Act, if these three bills pass, then everything will be set. The Trump family will no longer be just another wealthy name that doesn't rank on Wall Street. This would allow his family to enjoy the benefits of stablecoins for generations to come. Dividends.
The new Federal Reserve.
Yeah, and once the Anti-CBDC Act passes, then bank subsidiaries can issue coins and compliant companies can also issue coins. As long as you're an American company and you get a license, you can issue them. If the Federal Reserve can't issue it, then they've already transferred the power to issue currency from the Fed to themselves. So you see, this so-called compliance process is actually closely tied to the interests of certain groups or certain governments. If it weren't for the fact that US Treasury bonds can no longer be diluted, how could a stablecoin bill possibly pass? How could digital assets be defined as strategic reserves? On this day, I really feel that this so-called compliance is just too empty. As an individual practitioner on the surface and a seasoned veteran in the industry, I'm willing to let compliance play a limited role in managing part of the process. But I don't really believe in those so-called things that can be driven by small interest groups. Can centralized institutions really act in the best interests of investors? For example, let's talk about the last bear market caused by the collapse of educational societies, which led to the entire coin price dropping from 60,000 to just over 10,000. Wasn't it FTX? FTX was the most compliant exchange in the world, holding every license in the US. So what?
Only later did people realize it was just as non-compliant as the others.
Yeah, it was the biggest case of front running. The first to collapse was actually the most compliant one, while the non-compliant ones are still operating just fine. So what does everyone think about this issue?
What you just said about 21,000 is really good. Actually, the more money you manage, the faster compliance comes into play. They just want to regulate you. I had a really good experience before. Back when I was at the bank around 2015 or 2016, when Bitcoin was still at $600. When you buy stocks, gold certificates or bonds, you have to declare it. You have to say, I bought this, I want you to buy it, something like that. Back then, the banks didn't care. They didn't even ask what Bitcoin was. They didn't care about any of your assets or what trades you were making. But when it got to 20,000, around 2017 or 2018, that's when they wanted to start regulating it. But even though they tried, they didn't know how to do it. So things just flipped. They wouldn't let you buy it. If they found out you bought it, they'd lock you up. NFTs weren't allowed. ETFs weren't allowed either. They just banned everything outright. because they didn't understand any of it, not even stable coins. So they just wouldn't let anyone use them. But now things are different. Now it's gotten even bigger. This thing, now it's at 20,000 and you can't get in anymore. Right, so they said, no, that's not okay. Maybe even the bank executives and compliance teams themselves wanted to buy it, the more they tried to ban it. It seems like the bigger the buying and selling, the bigger the demand. Maybe that's what the CEO was saying. You can't just come in and make a quick buck. So I think all the governments now, they just need to act faster. Like if a country has a bad compliance regulation or clause, if that comes out, the advantage of Bitcoin is that it's fungible. It's not like, say, HSBC, where you definitely need to buy in Hong Kong, or in the US, like Alibaba or Tencent. You definitely need to deposit funds in Hong Kong to buy those. But with Bitcoin, you can buy it anywhere. So every country's government actually has its own competition going on. It's just like with educational institutions, government regulatory agencies.
The EU, the US, and the UK right now are all competing.
Right. If the US makes its regulations too strict or too self-serving, then other countries will just say, we don't have those restrictions. They'll say, our regulations are good, come here instead, you don't have to go to the US. That works too. So that's another advantage of Bitcoin.
So in Hong Kong, the regulatory policies are extremely friendly.
But Hong Kong can't say too much either. But it's basically the same. At the very beginning, the requirements are always the strictest and the highest. Then gradually they loosen up. Eventually, they just synchronize with other countries and regions. That's how it goes.
To put it simply, because the original purpose of the sandbox was the ecosystem is about how we support these creators. Okay, for creators, it's actually a simple issue. If you talk to them about numbers that are too big, they might not even be able to imagine it. So let's start with things that are more tangible to them. Today, as a creator, when I join this platform, I bring my own, turning my creations into assets. This experience is actually already imaginable. There are a lot of issues. How do I get protection for these things? How do I maintain vitality? In the process, whether I'm buying and selling or when I'm developing something new, I encounter new possibilities, things that they've never even imagined before. So how do we do that? Actually, to some extent, I think it's about how to give them confidence. This aspect is also extremely important. Of course, if they understand that you are online, that is connected to everything, you already have some check-ins and various things online. How do I ensure their loyalty? How do I capture some of their revenue? If you can see all of this, it's actually also a process of learning to make decisions. Gradually, the money grows. Then, of course, other issues will arise, such as how do I take things a step further? Should I be paying taxes, or how do I proceed? Under the regulations in this place, how can I continue without any concerns? My creative work is also an issue that really needs to be discussed. In fact, we have already collaborated with several universities in Hong Kong, but our collaboration doesn't mean that as soon as I come in and immediately tell the school how many cent tokens you need to buy or how much land you need to purchase. On the contrary, it's about how we help their students to understand, okay, I come in, Web3. I believe in developing my own creative work to build for a platform of the future. Some development, so we approach it from this development perspective. So the entry barrier is much lower. It's not like they have to immediately invest tens of millions right now. On the contrary, it starts with an experience first.
Actually, I can understand that. Especially in the B circle, in the Web3 world, there's a call for this. Regulation exists because everyone thinks there are a lot of opaque and unknown things in this space, and innovation happens quickly and is closely tied to money. With things so close to money, you could lose half a lifetime's savings in the blink of an eye if you're not careful. This is what people criticize the most about it. The biggest issue is money laundering. These two words come up the most, and there are many things that are not. Is it really true that opaque funds are being laundered or transferred through the crypto world on such a large scale? Are people really using their lost assets to launder money?
I often say that, in fact, everything in the crypto world is out in the open. You can see it all. Like I just mentioned, look at this. There's KYC and there's KYT. KYT is about checking whether the money you bring in is clean. I can see your entire transaction history, like when that Bitcoin came out. Every single transaction. I can see all of my transaction history. But with banks, you can't do that. If I receive money from another bank, the bank just assumes it's fine. They don't care whether the money is clean or not, nor do they care about what comes after. So in the crypto world, to be honest, moving money is actually a bit more difficult. We've already talked a lot about this. And then there's also the issue of KYC and AML. But to take a step back, there are still other compliance matters, for example, issues like copyright or whether your speech is allowed. Can you say in a sandbox game, I want to kill so-and-so? These are also compliance issues, but I don't think that within the crypto space, some people think that when we move toward decentralization, all of these compliance requirements are no longer necessary. I've never heard these people talk about things like copyright or freedom of speech. Actually, these things also require certain rules.
Can't say whatever.